Thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully we can help you solve the mystery of the InDev process, as well as give you some updates and tips to get you started. But first, we'll need some learning objectives. By the end of the webinar, you should be able to explain the process of going through the DED process, discuss key elements required in applications, and identify resources that can assist you in this process. So if you're transitioning your course from a traditional format to online or blended, it's important to understand the process. Unless specifically exempted, before any undergraduate course can be delivered 50% or more online, it must be submitted through the university's Academic Programs Proposal System, otherwise known as APPS, then approved by InDev and ultimately the Faculty Senate. And this is definitely for all undergraduate classes. You may not realize that many courses have already been approved for online delivery, and you should always check the list of approved distributed learning courses before submitting a proposal through APPS. If you pre-registered for the webinar, you actually received an email with a link to this approved course website. The first step in the process is for a faculty proponent to discuss the conversion plan with their unit head and then develop what we refer to as a DED syllabus, which includes a detailed schedule of instructional activities for the entire course delivery as well as other required components. And if you're going through, and we're going to, we have a question in the chat pod about what about grad classes, and we'll definitely answer that, but to give you a preview, InDev handles and reviews undergraduate classes. Grad Council actually reviews graduate level courses. CTE, and getting back to the DED process, CTE has instructional designers and syllabi templates that can help you get started in the planning process, and we can actually review your syllabus before you submit it. And this helps you streamline the processes a little bit, but also helps you make it through the process smoother. Our syllabi actually contains boilerplate language to help you, as well as all of the required InDev components that the InDev committee is looking for. And it's important to remember that sometimes it takes several weeks from the time you submit your application in APPS to the time it actually shows up in the InDev queue. In each step, which we've outlined on the slide you see in front of you, at any step along the way, you have somebody who's going to review it. Once you submit it, it goes to someone in your unit. Then it goes, after they've reviewed it and approved it, to the Office of Distributed Learning, which looks for certain criteria. Then it goes to your dean's office. And then once somebody in your dean's office reviews it, then it gets forwarded to the InDev committee or to Graduate Council. To add another layer of complexity in this, if this is a brand new course, it also will go before the Courses and Curriculum Committee, another subcommittee of the Faculty Senate. And then once these for undergraduate classes, if it goes through Courses and Curriculum and InDev, then it's forwarded to the Faculty Senate for their final review before it's distributed as an approved course to the registrar's office. One thing that you need to understand, though, is that anywhere along the way, if somebody has questions or comments, then it's submitted back down to the faculty proponent for revisions and or clarifications. And it looks like we do have a question. It says, if the course I'm teaching in summer 2020 is already on the list that you emailed yesterday, does that mean it has already been approved and therefore it does not have to be submitted through APPS? That's correct if you're not making any changes. And the list of all approved distributed education delivery courses is contained in that. So that link was sent out yesterday in the email that that if you pre-registered for, you should have received. And we'll forward that information back out after today's webinar also. The speed at which your application actually goes through this process is sometimes determined at your unit level. So having those early conversations is very important so that you're in line with your unit's activities and plans for that individual course. I'm going to actually turn it over to Karen now, and she'll actually go through some recent changes that InDev has made to streamline their processes for approval. So while we're transition, thank you.
All right, thank you, Lydia. Well, the Instructional Development Subcommittee of the Faculty Senate, fondly known as InDev, has simplified its process of reviewing and approving undergraduate courses for online delivery. And we've done this in two ways. First, we changed our process of reviewing undergraduate courses submitted through apps. Instead of only reviewing and deciding on course applications once a month, we're now looking at them weekly, at least for now. Now, you might be wondering, why are courses going through apps right now anyway, with summer 2020 already being okayed for online delivery? Even though Maymester and summer courses are approved for online delivery by way of the recent Faculty Senate proviso, you can still submit courses through apps for permanent online delivery approval. And so we'll touch on the specifics of the temporary approval a little bit later. Another thing InDev is doing to expedite approval is to contact course proponents about what I'm going to call fixable issues. Rather than rejecting a proposal and making it go all the way back through the apps process, I've been emailing proponents with InDev's feedback on minor application issues that need correcting, and then accepting those changes via email. So we're actually getting courses approved through apps faster that way as well. Now, you'll be happy to know that the new version, or the upcoming version of apps, which is still in the works, will allow those edits to be made within the system. But right now we're doing a little workaround. All right. Now, of course, no undergraduate course is fully approved for online delivery without an affirmative vote by the Faculty Senate. In order to get the Faculty Senate's on the Faculty Senate's meeting agenda, InDev has to get its review complete and submitted through apps at least 7 to 10 days before the meeting. So you can see how our old system of the monthly cutoff dates and the way we did reviews built in some natural lag time for approvals. So you can also see that we can't give you instant approval. But I can say this, that we have never, or in my tenure at least, I have never seen one of InDev's recommended approvals to the Faculty Senate be denied. And therefore, once you make it through InDev, your course is pretty much smooth sailing at that point. Now, there's a meeting this afternoon of Faculty Senate, and we've got, I think, one course that made it to the books for that time. The rest will actually go through for approval at the next regular meeting of Faculty Senate, which is on June 3rd. Now, for those courses that need to be up and showing on the registrar's bulletin for fall, we are making accommodations through the Office of Distributed Learning to make sure that the registration information shows up. So, not to worry there. All right, the second key simplification that we've done is involving everyone's favorite, the InDev Checklist. So let's take a look at the InDev Checklist. The revised InDev Checklist is found on the InDev homepage. So if you go to the USC page and just do in the search box InDev, this page will show up. And so we posted both the revised syllabus, or excuse me, revised checklist as well as an FAQ. But what we've done is we've streamlined the checklist to contain more user-friendly language and examples that are useful to you. So you can find it here as shown, and I think that we've also got a copy that was sent to you with your registration, and I believe in the box here on the page somewhere. I think we had the PDFs. All right, so what's going on here? Members of the InDev Subcommittee revised this checklist with input from key personnel. It's not like we just went, and made changes. We talked with CTE, we talked with the Office of Distributed Learning, the Provost's Office, the grad school, the subcommittee of the Faculty Senate on courses and curriculum, as well as getting advice and concurrence from the Faculty Senate Steering Committee. So we feel like this is a pretty good document that you're going to be pleased with. Perhaps most significantly, the checklist no longer requires proponents to include a tally showing the total number of student learning minutes per course-related activity. Yes, you heard me right. No more tallying up to 6,300. However, I can say this, that applications are still going to have to show a schedule of learning activities for the proposed course, which is best practice in developing your online course anyway. In addition, you'll be required to tick a box certifying that the course incorporates an amount of work equivalent to a face-to-face version of the same course that is appropriate for the particular amount of credit hours. So the standard is going to be the same for synchronous and asynchronous courses, so it's going to be easier for you to manage getting your checklist done. All right, now you might be thinking, where did this whole learning minutes thing come from? Well, the university and its accrediting body use the federal definition of a credit hour, which requires for each credit hour in a traditional face-to-face course that students experience at least 700 minutes of classroom instruction with the expectation of twice that amount in supplementary academic work outside the classroom for each credit hour. So even though InDev is not going to be looking at the detailed counting of the minutes tally, we need to be able to see when you submit your syllabus and apps that you've worked in enough learning activities into the schedule to reasonably allow us to determine that the course requires the same amount of overall work as the face-to-face version. So remember that InDev serves to review online courses for undergraduate courses. The Grad Council reviews and approves graduate courses. I'll turn it back over to Lydia now.
Thank you, Karen. As Karen mentioned, an instructional activities list will still need to be provided in the syllabus, and this needs to be a complete plan for all instructional activities for the complete term, outlined in a module format. In an online or blended class, best practices recommend that you provide students with a list of everything they'll be expected to complete within a module. Writing this out in advance will also make it easier to build out your class in Blackboard. Typically, most faculty plan out 14 modules, which provides maximum flexibility in teaching either a fall or spring course, and it also allows you to easily adapt these 14 modules to fit into a shorter schedule. Most faculty will plan for one module to be covered within 1 week of time in a traditional semester. And if you teach a shorter term, a student can complete 2 to 3 modules per week. And how do I start? As I mentioned earlier, an instructional designer can help you in the process and brainstorm ways to take what you're doing currently and make it work effectively online. I recommend actually thinking through exactly what it is you're doing and expecting students to do during a regular course week. And what does a traditional class look like to you? What does it look like? Do you want to use what's effective that you're currently doing? Or would you even like to start completely over and maybe do something completely different? Currently, a few things to think about. What is it, for instance, do you do on the first day of class? In a traditional class, you typically introduce yourself, you let students introduce each other, you start building community within class, you might go over the syllabus. What does your regular classes look like? Do you lecture for 40 to 50 minutes? How do you break up that lecture with active learning strategies? By the way, when you are teaching online and you're creating lecture videos, we recommend that they be no more than 20 minutes long. 10 to 15 is actually even better. And if you do have a longer video, you can divide them up into multiple parts. Outline what readings, assignments, tests, any other projects that you have them do within a time period. And then ask yourself, is there something I need to modify? What can I translate and do it well in an online environment? Do I want to do something that's a little bit more innovative than what I'm currently doing? And this module outline will be reviewed by the InDev Committee, who will look for a variety of instructional activities, including items such as student-to-student interaction, student-to-faculty interaction, and student-to-content interaction, as well as looking for online active learning strategies. They'll then provide recommendations or comments if there are any questions regarding what you've submitted. And remember that the online blended content must be equivalent to 2,100 learning minutes of in-class contact, or 6,300 total in and out of class time. On the slide that you're looking at right now is a draft example of a potential module outline. And if you look at it, it's just a bulleted list with action verbs to, for instance, read the syllabus, post to a discussion board, etc. So think through literally what you want your students to do, and this will make the committee's work a lot easier to interpret what you're trying to do and plan, and if you're meeting those 6,300 learning minutes. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen to give you some application tips at this point.
Alrighty, thank you, Lydia. All right, when we're reviewing courses through InDev, we can usually sense when an applicant maybe didn't use all the resources available to them before submitting an application. So we strongly encourage faculty to work with the instructional design team at CTE or the Office of Distributed Learning before they submit. Most of the problems show up in the syllabus. Here's what I think are the most common issues that delay approval. Let's see here. Okay, first, learning objectives. All right. Your learning objectives should be specific and measurable. And by the way, you should have at least 3 and try not to go over 10 unless you've been dictated by your division that you have to. But usually about 5 is right for most courses. So in essence, what learning objectives do is they describe what the student will be able to do as a result of having taken your course. For example, by the end of this webinar, you should be able to explain the process by which courses are approved for online delivery. You should be able to discuss the elements required in applications. So what we're doing is we're setting up what the student should be able to do. Your learning objectives should be based on Bloom's taxonomy. And if you are not familiar with that, it is I think we've got a link maybe. The Office of Student Engagement has a great booklet that is Learning Outcomes Brochure. It's a PDF you can find online. And basically these are higher order skills that your students should be able to do. So they start with an action verb like explain, discuss, all right, analyze, create, different levels of learning. So I recommend that if you're not familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, that you get familiar with it and maybe get with someone to assist you if you're not familiar. It's going to make a difference in your course because in order to develop meaningful assessments, you need to know the intended outcomes, and we'll touch on that in just a second. All right, another thing that sometimes causes an issue is if you, in the application, tick the box that says that this course is available for pass or fail as an option. That's fine and dandy, but what you need to do is work it into your syllabus exactly what the criterion will be in order to get that passing designation. So if you forget to do that, that sometimes holds people up. Another thing you want to think about is your grading scale. All right. Before you submit your application, I recommend that you hand your whole syllabus to a colleague, perhaps one that does not teach that specific course, and ask them to look it over first for typos, right? And also to check, in particular, your grading scheme. Does it make sense? Is it intuitive? Are the assignments and the grading system clearly explained? In essence, if we, your colleagues or InDev, can't understand it, your students won't either. So we do unfortunately get a lot of grading scales that don't make a lot of sense or they're hard to interpret. So be sure to make it simple is better, clear, and repeating yourself if you need to is okay as well. All right, the next thing is assessments. Now, InDev does look at your learning objectives, all right, and we do look at the work that you assign, and in particular also the assessments of how you measure your students' progress. And so we're looking to make sure that you're living up to what the objectives were supposed to be. So this idea is called backward design. When you develop those learning objectives, you do that first, and then you say, all right, step back. What am I going to build into this course to make sure that my students can master the skills that I said? So if we see a disparity there, it will delay your application as well. Let's see, your justification statement. This doesn't go in the syllabus. You can put it there. It's not a crisis, but it's actually one of the components of the application template itself. When you fill in this text box on the application, be sure you tailor it to your course and be specific. You're giving us the reason why this course should be taught online. Something simple like to benefit the students is too vague. How will it benefit the students? So if you copy and paste template language from a resource that you saw, make sure it's tailored to your specific course so that we understand why this course needs to be online. Now, let's touch on the courses for the special provision that the Faculty Senate passed. As you know, all Maymester and Summer 2020 courses will be delivered solely online. And the Faculty Senate approved this provision, which in essence says that any undergraduate course offered during the COVID-19 emergency period can be delivered online without having to go through the APPS approval system. As I understand it, the grad school also approved a similar provision. But there are a few things that you want to keep in mind. First, courses that are already, as Lydia mentioned, already approved for online delivery don't need to get reapproved. They're already approved. All right. Courses that are approved for online delivery under this provision, though, would not be eligible for online delivery beyond the emergency period unless you do submit it through apps. So if you're thinking, well, I'm teaching this in summer under the proviso, I can teach it next summer also because, hey, I taught it online. Well, make sure you put it through apps before then, because for ongoing approval, it needs to get through the app system. All right. The other thing is, and for those of you who are APLs out there, you probably already know this, hopefully you do. Before this session begins, whether it's Maymester or summer, your unit academic program liaison needs to submit to the Office of Distributed Learning all the syllabi for courses that otherwise would have had to gone through the APPS process. So those courses that are covered under this special provision need to have their syllabi submitted before the class begins. And the Office of Distributed Learning has set up a Dropbox for syllabi, and it's organized by unit. So one person, your APL, is going to submit all syllabi. And we've developed some Q&As for those individuals who might have specific questions about that also. All right. Faculty who are teaching courses that are approved for online delivery by this temporary provision are strongly encouraged to work with CTE and or the Office of Distributed Learning to develop this course. So time is of essence because, you know, summer is almost there, but you would be very wise to go ahead and begin working now with the resources that are available to make sure that your course is best set up. Now, what happens once the syllabi are uploaded with ODL? Well, we're hoping this is going to be a friendly and collaborative process. What happens is, after the APLs submit the syllabi, InDev will, and the Office of Distributed Learning will look over the syllabi and will contact any faculty that have big issues, and we're offering resources to help them. However, we will not be rescinding this emergency related approval for any of the online courses. All right, the syllabus submission process is for two things. One, to ensure the integrity of our online programming, and two, to give faculty who might need it the resources that can help them. All right. While I have your attention, I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out to the members of InDev. And if you are a colleague of any of these, please, let them know you appreciate their work. InDev has worked really hard to revise the process and revise the InDev checklist to continue on a rolling basis over the summer to look at applications. It's been a lot of work, so I want to thank Lisa Bailey, Karen Brown, David Dawson, Cher Downing, Sarah Ernst, Christy Friend, Rami Herrick, Terrence McAdoo, Katie Wolf, Aisha Haynes, Trina Hoop, Murray Mitchell, and Brian Jenkins. My apology if I missed anyone, but I think that's it. So thank you so much, and I'll give it back to Lydia.
Thank you, Karen. So let's talk a little bit about the resources that are there to help you. The university has several offices on campus that will help you go through the InDev and DED process. And one of the first places you'll want to start is with CTE's instructional designers and our website resources. We can discuss processes and help you answer questions. Most importantly, if you've never been through this process before, we can help you navigate the online course planning process. In addition, as I mentioned previously, we have syllabi templates with boilerplate language to make it easier for you to get through and to get started. And we also can review your syllabi before you submit it to apps. We'll also be with you through the entire process, not only through planning, but when you're actually teaching your class online also in any step of the way. So if in any time you need help, we're here to support you. The Office of Academic Programs and the Office of Distributed Learning. The Office of Academic Programs can actually help discuss the processes and answer any questions related to InDev and DED. This office actually controls the app system, so if there are any technical problems along the way, they can help you navigate through those challenges. And the Office of the Office of Distributed Learning can actually also walk you through the processes, and if you need to create lecture videos or transcripts for any of your courses that are being distributed, they're there to help you with that also. Each college has a unit liaison or academic program liaison that is a great resource for you. So if you have any questions related to policies or processes, please feel free to reach out to your unit liaison. And finally, the InDev Checklist and their website. Karen displayed a screenshot of this earlier, but the checklist is actually one of the best tools that you'll have to really review your content before you submit it through apps. And it's very important that you make a comparison and you do compare what you have in your syllabi to the checklist. The committee members are using this checklist as a guide. So if your syllabus has exactly what they're looking for, it'll make your process easier as well as theirs. And the great thing about the checklist is it does provide some examples of what they're looking for and examples that have successfully navigated through the process. And the website that they have also contains all of their meeting dates, links to the app system, and deadline dates for submission, as well as when the committee meets itself. So after today's webinar, we're going to actually again email out the links to these resources and to the instructional design consultation form. If at any time you want a consultation with one of us, please feel free to reach out. And we'll also include the checklist again and the frequently asked questions list that InDev put together. So this actually brings us to the end of today's webinar. And we want to take a minute and see what questions you have for us. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to type them out in the chat box, and we'll navigate through those as best as you can. We also have the file share pod back up in the middle of the screen, and if you want to download your own copy, if you don't have a copy, feel free to click on the title of the file and click download. So thank you so much for joining us today.